What's up, guys? So it seems that the longer that I'm in private practice, the more often I run into my clients outside of the office. And many of you have asked me about what we do when this happens. So in this video, I'm going to share my top tips for how to navigate running into your therapy clients outside of the office. It requires that we not acknowledge both past and current clients, current and present. Welcome to Private Practice Skills. I'm Dr. Marie Fang, psychologist in private practice. I post videos offering tools I learned the hard way about starting and growing private practice so that you don't have to. So let's talk about running into clients outside of the office. I am still totally amazed by just how often it happens. I mean, I live in the city of San Jose, which has a population of 1 million people. And I used to work over 50 miles away in San Francisco, and even then I would still run into my clients. This only really started happening for me once I started working in private practice, and I think there's something about the type of ideal client that I work with who tends to look a lot like me, but maybe just in a slightly earlier phase of life. So then it makes sense that they likely shop at the same stores, go to the same church, blah, 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 and makes it much more likely that we run into each other. Now, I used to really stress out a lot about the possibility of running into my clients outside of the office. When I was in grad school, it seemed like this thing that we were meant to avoid like the plague. And I'm not sure why we were taught that, but it really stuck with me. And so I always ended up carrying this kind of low level of anxiety whenever I was out in public, because I was always kind of keeping an eye out for running into clients, and I would try to avoid them. But at this point, I've run into my clients outside of the office so often that I realize all that stress was just completely unnecessary. And if anything, it's really helpful for our clients to see that we're just normal human beings like anybody else. I mean, we too shop at the grocery store, hang out with friends at the coffee shop, and attend workout classes. I mean, it's really normalizing to see your therapist do normal things. Now, with all of that said, it's still really helpful to have a protocol in place for how we navigate running into clients outside of the office. I've really changed how I deal with this over the years, so I'm going to share the top tips that I've learned with you here. Tip number 1, bring it up in the first session. At the beginning of every intake session, I let clients know that it's possible we might run into each other outside of the office. I normalize just how common it is, and I also remind them that client privilege requires that I not acknowledge them. I let them know that if we do cross paths, the ball is completely in their court to decide if they want to acknowledge me or not, and that I will not be offended if they choose not to acknowledge me. So by bringing this up in the first session, it really helps manage expectations on both ends and allows both of you to feel much more comfortable if you do run into each other in the future. Number 2, always respect confidentiality. Now, as I mentioned, confidentiality requires that we not acknowledge both past and current clients when we run into them outside of the office. I mean, if you say hello to your client, it might put them in a really uncomfortable position. I mean, maybe you're at the grocery store, you see your client in the aisle and you say hello, but maybe they're at the grocery store with their spouse and they don't want their spouse to know that they're seeing a therapist. Now they have to navigate telling their spouse how they know you and either let them know that they're seeing a therapist when maybe that's not what they wanted to do, or they have to make up a lie, and it's better not to put them in that position at all. Number 3, allow your client to take the lead. If you cross paths with a client outside of the office and they do acknowledge you, it doesn't mean that they've completely waived all of their right to confidentiality. They've only waived a small piece of their confidentiality. I mean, I've had it come up before where my clients like to say hello to me outside of the office, but then they might introduce me to their spouse or friend as their friend or coworker, as though we know each other somehow other than through the therapeutic context. So even if your client acknowledges you first, be sure you let them take the lead on how that interaction goes. Number 4, know your boundaries. Now, I've found that most clients do choose to acknowledge me when we run into each other outside of the office, and they also like to chit-chat a bit. And this isn't so black and white that we're not allowed to chit-chat at all, but it's really important for you to know what your boundaries are. So for example, there was one time when I was on my way to the office and I decided to stop by a coffee shop, and lo and behold, in line was the client that I was about to go meet with. They chose to acknowledge me, and they also chit-chatted with me while we were waiting in line, and it was totally socially appropriate. We were talking about what was our favorite types of coffee. We were talking about how the weather was so nice that day, and then at the end, they said, "See you soon." This is a completely normal and healthy interaction. I mean, I could have set my boundaries though and said, well, I really don't want to have any type of interaction with my clients. And so if they decided to chit chat, then it could be an option for me to say, you know what, why don't we go ahead and talk about this later? Now, with that said, even if you're totally comfortable talking with this client outside of the office, there are certain things that really should stay off limits as far as what you chat about in public. So if you find that your client really does start pushing the boundary and brings up therapeutic content, then maybe you can say something like, why don't we chat about this later? So that way you're not acknowledging that you're their therapist, but you give them a reminder that this isn't really the space to talk about it. You can talk about it later in therapy. Sometimes I've had it come up where I run into a past client outside of the office and they start bringing up therapeutic content. In that case, I suggest that if they want, that they can give me a call. So once again, it's acknowledging a healthy boundary, but it's not acknowledging how we know each other. Number 5, document. Now, whenever I run into a client outside of the office, I make sure to make note of it in their chart. And this is really just to sort of cross my T's and dot my I's. So there's a little paper trail in case there's ever any question or concern in the future about what happened. I have a little paper trail of what happened. And number 6, revisit later. So whenever I run into a client outside of the office, then I make sure to bring it up the next time we see each other in the following session. I just ask them what the experience was like for them, if it brought up any feelings, and I also make a plan together with them for what we might do if we cross paths again. I have found that more often than not, there's some really relevant therapeutic content that comes up as a result of crossing paths outside of the office. Well, I hope you found these tips helpful, as you will inevitably run into clients outside of the office as your practice grows. Let me know in the comments below if there's any tips you would add to these, and until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well. Today's video is brought to you by TherapyNotes.com. TherapyNotes helps with scheduling, notes, and billing so that you can spend more time with your clients and less time on back office paperwork. Click the link in the description of this video to get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment. And we also make a plan together to